So when we talk about metacognition, what we mean is any time a person is thinking about, monitoring, or controlling another mental state. In the context of student learning, usually what we're concerned with studying is how students believe they learn, how they believe they should study, when students are studying, what choices are they making in terms of how they're choosing to study or restudy, whether they decide to keep studying or to stop studying, and probably most importantly, how do students monitor or make self-evaluations of their own learning? An example of metacognition in a real-life learning situation would be a student who's studying for an exam. They might be studying from their textbook, they might have notes they took in class, they might have online videos that they were assigned to watch. That's all study processes. As they're studying those materials, metacognition comes into play when the student decides to make choices about how they're studying. So for example, the student might have the belief that if they watch the video multiple times, they will learn better. Metacognitive monitoring comes in when they decide to self-assess how well they have learned. And hopefully they're accurate. Whether they feel they have learned or are understanding the information well or not, hopefully they make appropriate restudy decisions, either to keep studying or to stop studying. Now, in a perfect world, students would be able to just study and they would be accurate at knowing how much they already know, how well they're understanding the materials, and they would then make accurate or efficacious restudy decisions, and then they can do well on their test. The problem is that in most real-life learning situations, students of all levels, whether they're children, young adults, older adults, it doesn't matter. In general, people are not great at assessing their own learning or understanding. So what happens there is students often understudy. So for example, there are a lot of factors that lead them to overestimate their learning, and then they don't study enough for the exam, or they don't know enough about how best to study. So they study in an ineffective way, they take the test the next day or hopefully at a later time, and they don't do as well on it as they thought they would. Many researchers in the field study ways to get students to make more accurate self-evaluations so that they know better how well they are learning or understanding at current, and also try to train them to make more strategic or more efficacious restudy decisions. In terms of when students are trying to decide if they have learned information well, if they understand it, when they make decisions about whether or not they should restudy, a lot of research shows that students use faulty information to make those decisions. So they use information that's not predictive of their actual future test performance as the basis for their judgments. So for example, a student might judge that they have understood the information well enough to stop studying because of the amount of time they've spent studying. So a student might say, I've studied this for 3 hours, I should stop because I'm done. That is great if the student is a great reader or is using really effective study strategies, but usually they're not. Usually that means that they were rereading their notes for 3 hours or playing on Facebook and while studying for 3 hours. One method that students can use to really make more accurate restudy decisions is to test themselves in some way while they're studying. So for example, answering practice questions, whether they were provided by the teacher, whether they were practice questions from a textbook or other online source, whatever, is one of the best things they can do while studying, because it not only is great at reinforcing learning, but it is really good at telling the students you either have or have not understood what you're studying. Hopefully they can use that information to then make much more efficacious restudy decisions. In my laboratory, one topic we're looking at right now is how students' beliefs about learning play into their monitoring and their self-evaluations of their own learning, as well as their restudy decisions and choices that they make. So for example, most students believe that having images in a textbook helps their learning. And overall, they believe this because it is true. When there are diagrams and charts and maps and things like that in textbooks, that usually leads to better learning. The problem is, most textbooks right now are designed by the publishers to have a lot of photos, have a lot of pictures, some of which are informative of learning or of the content, and some are not. Some are just there for decoration. Research from my lab demonstrates that students who believe that images help learning tend to overestimate how much the images in any given reading are helping their comprehension. So when they are presented with diagrams and charts that do help their learning, they accurately judge because they believe images help their learning, that the images are helping their learning, and they are. But they are also just as equally thrown off when they are given photographs and other visual information that doesn't help their learning. They think that it does. So in those cases, those students, even though they are doing the right thing, they're reading the textbook, they're looking at the images that are provided, you get this ironic effect that they spend time looking at these images which don't help their learning, and then they think they've learned it well, and then when they get the test, they don't do as well as they thought because the images were there. So given how important these misconceptions about how students learn or think they learn is for larger successful learning, one way that researchers and educators together can improve student learning is by correcting students' misconceptions about how they learn or about how they should be studying, and replacing those incorrect beliefs with strategies for effective learning, both in terms of how to study, how to pay attention in class, how to take notes, how they should be studying for tests, how they should be evaluating their learning while studying, and what are effective ways to restudy.